Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. How are you doing today? Welcome to our interesting session with Chris Ballen, somebody who needs absolutely no introduction. Digital marketing quick tips live. This is going to be a different session, very, very different from how we do our standard webinars. As I was just talking to Chris, and what he was saying is that this reminds him of how we do roundtables in the convention, and I think that's a great analogy. So, you have shared your questions. Chris has them. Chris is here with us. As far as slides go, this is all we have. So, just before we start, I would like to do a quick AV check. Uh, can you see the screen? It's just one slide. Chris is here. Hey, Chris, how you
Hi,
doing?
everyone.
Awesome. That's great. I think you've got your entire video audio setup. You are all set up. I like your microphone.
Yes, thanks. I'm using my filming setup today so that everybody gets the same look and feel as those quick tip videos. I want to make sure that this is a good Q&A experience for everyone. We've got a few questions that were pre-submitted, and I want to make sure that there's some time for us to take some live questions too. For everybody who didn't have the time to submit anything, feel free to ask. This is the kind of webinar where you get to ask the questions that there are no dedicated webinars for. Um, like Devesh said, I view it like a roundtable at convention where you're able to sit down with me and ask the questions about digital marketing in general, whether it be SEO, whether it be client management, whether it be team management, and pick my brain. I'm happy to answer any questions that everyone has today.
Amazing. That's great, Chris. And I'm hearing all positive stuff. Woot woot from Peter Burson. Sounding super good from James Alexander. Seeing and hearing from New Hampshire, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow, that's awesome, Mark. So
That's
amazing. So I think everybody can hear us and we are all set, Chris. So let's begin.
fantastic, fantastic. So I'm going to start with some of the pre-submitted questions. We've got a handful of them. In the meantime, if you've got a question, we'll do our Q&A session just after we're finished these. Make sure to raise your hand if you do have a question. Then we'll unmute you and you can ask your question. All right? Perfect. So without further ado, let's dive into some of the first questions. So the first submitted question is nice background. Thank you. Who doesn't love Spidey? Uh, I don't know if that is the question submitted here, but I think everybody loves Spider-Man. Okay, here's the full question. Um, I've heard it's good to syndicate blog posts to Reddit, but I'm having difficulty finding a subreddit that will accept my questions. Any tips here? My particular interests are for a divorce attorney and replacement window dealer. Thanks. So this is interesting. I am a big proponent of posting to Reddit as a social bookmarking avenue because the engagement is so high. The approach here shouldn't be that you're creating a new post on a subreddit promoting your services. The approach here should be that you're responding to an existing post promoting these services. So, for instance, instead of finding a subreddit about businesses, find a subreddit about home renovations. And when somebody says, I'm considering upgrading my windows in my home from wood to PVC, that's when you respond. Um, hey, I recommend XYZ. I know a fantastic dealer in location ABC. You should check out their website here. That's the way to do a response with a post to a subreddit. You're going to get more engagement with a relevant post than just a blank open post where you're not asking anything or prompting any feedback. Similarly, with the divorce attorney, go to relationship subforums. And, if somebody is saying, should I leave my wife? Sure, maybe the answer is yes. I know a great divorce attorney. Link to their website. right? It's a little shameless, but it's more relevant than trying to create a post just promoting a business, right? I've had some great personal success doing this, promoting some of our quick tips videos, in fact. All right. On to question 2. How do we create a Google My Business for a painting company if they just have a home address and no business address? They don't want to show their home address in the listing. They have a P.O. box, but Google doesn't want it as the address. What do you advise? So there are some options in GMB to say that you don't service out of your location, to say that you instead service a service area or a radius around a specific location. In those instances, you can select specifics to not display addresses and instead display service areas. So instead of that pin on the map, you get a border, you get a radius of service. And this might be you only service a specific zip code, or you only service a specific city or a region, or you can select a mileage radius around that address that you have. Again, you don't have to display an address in GMBs. There are options to avoid that. Okay. On to question 3. How do you deal with clients that, oh, sorry, one moment. How do you deal with clients that take attention to detail to the next level? I like this question. This one's very relevant. Meaning they comment about every single thing, like the resolution of a photograph to the tonality of the latest pink salmon color of the website. Wow, that is very specific. It is their business. It is their brand. How do you keep effectively? How do you keep efficiency on the horizon while accommodating their requests? So there are clients that feel the need to be very hands-on, that feel the need to be very picky about everything. These are typically the owner operators, the one-man shows that have done everything on their own and have never relinquished control. So it's good to get their feedback ahead of time to know their expectation. Know that they're going to be this kind of client before you engage them, and then build in a buffer to your markups, because it's going to be your time that's on the line here. You might want to charge, instead of 100% markup, 120% markup, 150% markup. Also know what kind of clients you want to deal with. If they're the kind of client that you don't want to deal with, and you can tell during the initial contacts that they're going to be like this, sometimes it's better to just walk away from a prospect than to deal with the headache. But if you've engaged with them and they turn out to be a headache, then you have to properly engage in communication with them. Find out why they want to be this specific and handle objections. They're going to raise objections, but better that they raise it once and you handle it, then they bring it up every time you want to talk about a color, or every time a new image is added to the site, or every time you write a new piece of content. Okay? So there are ways to deal with it before, during, and after. But I'd say if you know that a client is going to be like this, consider not engaging them. All right. Next up, what is the best way to do a first engagement with a client? Free initial offering, discount consulting. So this one I've got some very strong feelings about. If you'll recall my talk from convention of last year about the new ASEO lifecycle, I feel very strongly that the best first engagements are technical engagements. Review a website, find out what the issues are, and then offer solutions. So whether this is a lack of optimization on site, whether this is slow load speed, or this is a lack of an SSL certificate, the best way to get a foot in the door and to show a client that you're capable of working with them that you're worth working with is to do something small first. And I always recommend a small first engagement. But typically, those first engagements come off of an initial meeting. Do something like a quick competitive analysis, which many vendors like ALM can assist you with, so that you walk in knowing what their competitors look like, what issues are on their site, and you've got recommendations holstered so that you can pull them out and make them when they ask what's next. All right. So a little bit of both, some free consulting and some initial paid technical engagements are the best way to grow an ongoing relationship, especially during this time, this global environment, when so many clients are so gun shy on ongoing solutions. Start with something small first. All right. Next up, what can we offer for a client that's not ready for a blueprint but needs organizational assistance? Good question. I have a client that's a growing startup that doesn't have personas, messaging, or a long term plan in place, but also lacks the capital for a full consulting engagement. So this is incredibly relevant. Many businesses, many small businesses haven't even thought about who their targets are. They're more concerned about logistics. How do I start up my business? How do I get stock? How do I get it to people? If they're looking to really assess who their market is and start into the marketing aspect of their business, keep in mind that you don't have to engage in a full blueprint immediately. You can carve out sections of a blueprint. They're essentially modular. If you think that a client is suitable for a blueprint, whether it's a small scale blueprint or a large scale blueprint, but you know they're not ready for it yet, start with something like a personas exercise and sell that as individual so that you can carve it out and you can start determining who they're speaking to. That alone is a big first step for many businesses to just know who their audience is, who they're speaking to, and how to position themselves. Then messaging comes later. Then the long term plan after that. Again, it doesn't have to be sold all at once. You can carve it out. Speak to a rep at any supplier that offers blueprints, like myself or my colleagues, will help you parcel that out to make it a little bit more manageable for smaller clients. All right. How do I set expectations for SEO with a client that is looking for immediate turnaround? Is SEO a solution for a demanding client? All right. So I think that we're all aware that SEO is a longer term solution. And if you've positioned it as such, but have a client that's demanding results after the first 30 days or after the first 60 days, even, then it's a matter of just handling that objection and letting them know we're starting to see results. We're just completing our first optimizations and we're waiting for Google to index the changes that we've made to the site, both on site and off site. That typically takes around 90 days, but you can start seeing some movement within the first 60 or so. If you have a client that said, we're 30 days in, where's my page one rankings? Then very clearly they've misunderstood what the goal of SEO is. We've seen this before, and we've also seen this with clients that have been with us for a significant period of time, and we've done a strategy shift with, where we've taken them from strategy A, which has worked, to strategy B, which requires some more spool up time. And they immediately say, well, where are my results? We've been doing this new strategy for all of 3 weeks. Why am I not seeing new rankings? So a lot of it is proper objection handling when it comes to this, proper setting of expectations. But if they are demanding, and if they want immediate turnaround, pivot the solutions you've recommended over to something like PPC. PPC is the kind of solution where you're going to see near immediate turnaround. where you can get in front of new eyes and a new audience like that. And if you can do that, and if that's what they're looking for, and the client is capable of spending that little more on PPC, because you are dividing the spend between spend to channel and management, if you can do that, then you're going to be able to meet some of those expectations. All right. So again, if their expectations have changed, if they are looking for something different now, then it's time to pivot. All right. Next up, and last for the pre-submitted questions. So if you do have questions, make sure to raise your hand. Are number one SERP results still the goal for SEO, or does number one matter with GMB and local results in the mix? All right. So this is another interesting one. Are organic results the be all end all for SEO still? This really depends on what the client's goals are. If the client's goals are to get to the largest audience possible and to just spread more awareness, then absolutely organic results are the be all end all. If they want to start stealing market share and get in front of new eyes, organic is the best way to the biggest audience with the biggest value proposition in there as well, the biggest ROI potential. But if you've got a client that's looking for local conversions or looking for lead generation, then the easiest way to get that is through local results and GMB listings. If you know that a client has a lot of branded searches, then promoting your GMB and optimizing your GMB is the way to capitalize on those branded searches, because that GMB listing is going to pop up in the side of a search engine's result page, and you can generate leads without people having to click through to a site that may not be ready to get leads yet, whether it be from a technical standpoint or a development standpoint. And local results are, of course, best for anybody that's looking to do something like walk-ins or local servicing. If that's your client's goal, if they're servicing a very small radius or geo, then local is what you're going to want to target. And that's an entirely different strategy to something like a national or a multi-region organic strategy. If you can determine what your client needs and what their goals are, what their business goals are, then number one in a search engine result page in organic results isn't necessarily the target that you have to go over for SEO any longer. For SEO to bring results to a client. All right. So I hope I've answered those pre-submitted questions. Let's see who's got questions in the audience. So it looks like there are a few. So instead of reading off questions for the few people that have submitted them, I'm going to unmute them for you to answer, for you to ask your questions. All right, unless you'd prefer them asked anonymously, but we'll see. Okay. Let's see. So we'll answer some of these anonymously. What is the difference between referring IPs and referring domains? So this is very interesting. So a referring domain is a URL that's linking back to you. A referring IP might be a referring server that's referring back to you. So if, say, for instance, a business has multiple URLs or has an overall corporate URL and then some child URLs, they might all be on the same IP. So that might mean that you might have 3 different referring domains, meaning 3 different domains are linking back to you, but you might have only one referring IP from that, since it's all from the same essential location, from the same server farm. It's a good way to tell whether you've got multiple sites under the same family that are promoting you. Google sees them a little bit differently, but overall, for the health of a backlinking profile, your referring domains should be your standard here. All right. Are you aware of how long the GMB backlog is to add a new business? So normally the turnaround for verification for adding a new business has typically been 2 weeks. That's now increased to 3 to 4 weeks for business cards to be sent out. They still have a rather large window in there. So they say anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, but we've seen it be typically 3 to 4 weeks. Do remember that if you've requested 2 postcards, so you've requested the first one, you can go in and say that you haven't received it yet and request a second one. But as soon as you request that second one, you can call for phone verification. Okay. The operator staff is a little taxed at the moment on Google's end, but they do still have those availabilities. You just need to catch them at the right time or be patient enough to sit on hold for a little bit, typically about a half hour or so. But phone verification happens like that. For small companies that need to operate on a thin budget, what search strategies would you recommend? Depends on how small or thin a small budget is, really. I would recommend that every business start with some form of local. It's always recommended that you own your backyard. I've used that term before. Many people might have heard me use that term before, but that means that you shouldn't try to steal region or market share away from somebody else until you've maximized your own market share, your own reach. So start with local. Doing something small like Google My Business or some tune-ups to your website is going to maximize your existing audience as opposed to acquiring new audience, which is going to take some time and is going to be a little costly. But you can do GMB, you can do GMB optimizations or website tune-ups for a couple hundred. And if that's all that a client has, then it's a good start. Remember that a Google My Business listing should be treated like a second homepage. It also pulls into local listings, local results, the maps listings. So the better optimized it is, the more overlap you have. The more overlap you have, the more potential you have. So again, if you're working with a client with a very small or very thin budget, start there. All right. Anyone else with any other questions? Oh, here we go. Have you noticed GMB fail to update a company address due to COVID? The prospect is GMB, their GMB is correct in GMB and verified, but Google Maps and GMB is not reflecting the new address. Now, we've seen this before. And it's confusing because we've seen this when there are multiple GMB listings for a business, but with different addresses. A client takes a look at the GMB and says, my address is right, but Google Maps is wrong. But Google Maps is pulling from a different listing. This might be a listing that was created previously that the client maybe doesn't have access to, that was created by a different employee or by a different company. But typically you see this kind of conflict arise when there are multiple GMB listings, same client, different addresses. Google is taking the older one, the one that hasn't been changed, or the one that's legacy in priority, which is why it's not showing up in maps. And it might take a little bit for the new listing to show up in maps. So just make sure that a new GMB listing, a redundant GMB listing, wasn't created here. That's likely what the issue is. Otherwise, I've not seen an issue with maps listings not pulling from the accurate GMB results. Keep in mind that the GMB results won't be pulled into maps immediately. Like any website, like any listing, it needs to be indexed first. But good question. Good question. All right. Fantastic. One thing that I did want to cover today, not a question in particular, but a trend that I'm seeing, is that since pandemic and since lockdown, it seems that a lot of businesses are trending towards one-time engagements or development engagements over ongoing engagements. So a lot of clients that are in this uncertain time are hesitant to engage in something ongoing, whether it be PPC, whether it be SEO, whether it even be web maintenance. So it's important right now to start pursuing that. As many businesses around the world and many regions start opening their doors, now's the time to start back into ongoing. Many clients that you may have talked to in the past 3 or 4 months that said no to ongoing engagements may be more receptive to them now, knowing that their doors are either freshly open or are going to open soon. Digital marketing is the leader in marketing right now, rather than physical or in person. So we are in a better position than ever as digital marketers to pursue this. So I recommend that everybody follow back up on their prospects that might not have panned out in the past few months and revisit them. They may be more receptive now. All right. A few more questions come in. Excellent. Please do keep them coming, folks. You mentioned that address is not needed for GMB, but do we need to add the address on the website for SEO purposes? Ideally, yes. So it's a little bit of a misnomer here. You do need the address for your GMB listing. It just doesn't need to be displayed. That's the difference. You need to enter an address, but you cannot have it displayed in GMB. On your website, it's ideal to have your address for local results in particular. But we would understand why a client wouldn't want to put their home address on there. Keep in mind that it's very rare for people to do walk-ins from an address that's posted on site, especially if you aren't doing something like putting a maps listing in the contact section of your site. You don't necessarily have to put your address in the contact section of a site. Tucking it into the footer of a site means that it's on the site and it can be optimized, but doesn't have to be one of your "you can contact us here" methods. Okay. Again, it's ideal to have it on the site in some way, shape, or form so that you can optimize it and so that your citations have an exemplar for your name, address, phone number, NAP. Is Pinterest really a great social bookmarking site? I view Pinterest as a social bookmarking site the way that I would view Instagram as a social channel. Since they are very visual mediums, there's very little in the way of engagement that means anything to search engines through them, unless you're doing specifically image optimization or image sharing. If you've got something that's a video, if your client is very heavy into videos, to-dos, and how-tos, then it's worth it as a content submission avenue, but not necessarily as a social bookmarking site. I would view it more as a social channel than a social bookmarking site. It is great for specific businesses that are very visual, for sure, just like Instagram is. But again, the lack of text content really hurts here. Right? For companies with multiple locations, how do you get through Google's restrictions, such as offices within 50 miles within each other? So this is an interesting one. This is one that plays off of something that we mentioned before in service area or service radius. If you set a service radius that's smaller than an overlap, then you can get through some of these restrictions. So for instance, if you've got two businesses that are within 50 miles of each other, and Google is saying that you can't have multiple locations like that, then you can set the service area of each to smaller than the overlap. If you do that, then it can get through some of these loopholes. Otherwise, what you need to do is you need to create one master listing and then have the different locations on the website. That typically happens with franchises and franchise sites. But again, if you set the service radius small enough that they don't overlap, you can typically get around the restriction of not having multiple listings. Okay. And in this instance, setting the service area, but keeping your address listed, unlike some of the conversations we've had about not listing your address, but including a service area, would be recommended. So set a low service area, but keep your address visible. That's ideal for maps. I've heard running a PPC is a good way to assist keyword research for SEO. The keyword research is critical for each of this manufacturer's part IDs. Is this still cost effective? So if not a full PPC campaign, at very least PPC level keyword research. So there are ways to use something like Keyword Planner or to do full keyword research PPC style to help inform your SEO keyword research. This gives you a little bit better of an idea and a little bit broader of an idea of how to target each SKU that a client might be targeting, that they might be optimizing for. What I would recommend is instead of going broad spectrum and optimizing for each part ID or each SKU, take a look at what the client's top sellers are or top trafficked pages are and start with them. Then find out what works for them and trickle that down to smaller pages. I've seen with large volume distributors that have tens of thousands of products that many of them don't get more than one visit a month. And in that case, you shouldn't have to invest in broad scale keyword research for every part or every SKU. Do something that works for the higher trafficked, parts or the higher trafficked products, and then just propagate that across everything else. It's going to be miles better than they're getting now. It's going to be far less expensive, and it's going to be a strategy that works. Okay. Automated optimization of databases is the ideal path here. We've worked with several manufacturers that do this to great success. All right. Is social media as an initial strategy effective for small companies now that Facebook and Instagram shops are available? So the issue with starting with social, especially organic social, is that organic social doesn't grow your audience. Organic social is a way to speak to your existing audience. The way to grow through social is through paid social. Surprise, surprise, Facebook wants you to pay them. Now, with engagements happening through social, through marketplace or shops, it's a good route to do a selling campaign through paid social. Yes. The problem is that you're looking at the same scale budgets that you are for a PPC campaign, where you have a management fee and you have a spend to channel, which can get very expensive for smaller businesses. There are more effective ways to do this, but again, instead of getting too ambitious, the client should start targeting their local area. Start with something local, ramp up their local, and then use the proceeds of that to reinvest in expanding their reach. If they can do that, then they're going to have a much more effective and much more paced strategy, especially if they're planning 6, 12, 24 months in advance. If you can do that, like a blueprint style long-term plan for them, where you say your first 6 months are all local, your next 12 months are all expanding your audience, and then your following few months are about taking over market share or expanding into new markets or growing. If you can do that, then not only do you have a client that's going to see success over the long term, but you're going to create a long-term engagement with them that's going to make you a crucial part of their marketing strategies. All right. We've got time for a few more questions, folks. If you've got any, please submit them. I know that there are some people here that haven't submitted any questions yet, so please feel free to. All right. Now, on the point of paid social, I wanted to bring up Facebook Messenger campaigns. Facebook Messenger campaigns, I did a quick tips video about it very recently, are incredibly effective methods to pre-qualify leads. If you're dealing with a business that needs to pre-qualify, whether it be the scale of a project, the budget availability, the needs or the expectations of a client, then messenger campaigns are a great way to do this. These have set chat paths that drive users down to answer a set of questions to determine whether or not they're worth even passing on to a client's sales team. We've got examples of this ranging from mortgage brokers to loans officers to even tech support companies to weed out people that are looking for support versus customer service. They've all been incredibly effective, and across the past 4 months have seen incredible spikes in engagement, and it's something that I can only see continuing in the future. It's something that I absolutely recommend. Okay. What is the process to show Facebook ads only to new eyes? By this, do you mean to reach a new audience, not your existing audience? If that's the case, then set geos and demos in Facebook ads. Set an audience that you haven't spoken to yet. Look into your secondary audience or your tertiary audience and start tailoring campaigns towards them. Start making lookalike audiences for some of your key sellers, your top engaging users. Expand geos. If you've saturated a geo and you feel you're maximizing it, then either you need to change your message, your targeting, or expand your geo. Okay, a Facebook ads campaign shouldn't be static throughout the entire course of a campaign. If you're engaged with a client on a 6-month term for Facebook ads, change that campaign up every 2 to 3 months. Add in new campaigns, add in new targeting. That's how you start snowballing to a larger audience. And that's how you get a new message out there that remains fresh. Because if you're keeping the same message for 6 months at a time, then the audience that you reached 6 months ago is going to ignore you 6 months from now. Keep changing it up. Change up your ad copy. Change up your visuals. Change up your linking URLs. Change up your offers. It needs to grow and evolve. That's how you reach and engage a new audience, especially reaching an audience that didn't engage with you the first time around. Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions, everyone. So can I create a lookalike audience but show it only to a new audience? So unfortunately not. You can't say don't show this to existing users. Don't show this to people that have seen my ad before. You can create a lookalike, but it shows it to everyone. It's not a bad thing for users that have seen your ads to see your ads again. Because if they didn't engage the first time, they may engage the second or the third or the fourth time. Think of it like remarketing in that regard, where if somebody sees your banner or your client's banner on 2 or 3 or 4 sites, you're going to stay top of mind and you're going to get more of an audience and more of an opportunity to click through that back to the conversion methods. Okay, so there is a lot of possibility in maximizing an audience that has seen your ads but hasn't engaged yet. Don't count them out. Okay. Otherwise, create a brand new audience. Create a brand new geo demo, a brand new psychographic. Um, that's the only way to reach an audience that you haven't previously spoken to. Is just to create a new audience or to target a new audience. Okay. I hear Google Analytics will show direct for links without UTM if they come from LinkedIn or other social networks. Doesn't Google know the sources and mark it correctly? So there is some opportunity for some of these lines to be blurred, but many social sites, whether it be LinkedIn or Facebook or anything else, automatically tag links with UTM. The only way that that's not done is if a link isn't posted directly through the post itself. If it's not done through the LinkedIn text box, if it's copy and pasted into something else that's then inserted in, if you're quoting something else or you've screenshotted something else, then there's a chance that the UTM isn't going to be added to it, but the chances are very, very slim. Otherwise, they're all properly associated with social as a lead source. I've not seen any issues with misattribution here. And we look at hundreds and hundreds of analytics installations. Okay. If it is an issue or it has been an issue, it will very quickly be squashed by Google. All right, excellent. Now, speaking of issues to be squashed by Google, I want to remind everybody that just as important as Google Analytics is Google Search Console. Make sure that you, your client, your team, whether it be a production center or an internal team, have eyes on Search Console on a regular basis and are reporting on this, because Google will notice any issues with a site and flag them immediately. If there is a warning, if there is an error, if there is an issue, it should be top priority to resolve it. Whether it be an indexing issue, a broken link, a missing page, whatever it is, it needs to be addressed immediately, because Google is placing more and more weight on the technical proficiency of a site for rankings. This is because, again, Google wants to ideally avoid sending people to your website. They'd rather send people to your GMB since they can control the information that's there. Somebody doesn't have to click through a SERP. Somebody doesn't have to make it through to a broken site just because the algorithm says this person has been around forever, so we're going to keep them in the top spots. Okay, that goes back to my recommendation for initial engagement to be technical, because you want to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunity for your audience to convert. If they aren't converting through GMB, they're going to convert through your site. But if your site is not up to snuff, no one's going to convert. Okay? That might be one of the reasons why a lot of businesses lately are engaging in one-time as opposed to ongoing, just to get their sites up to snuff, knowing how much of their business that was traditionally done physically is now being done digitally. Has Google's analytics report 60 million from last year been updated for COVID pandemic? Not yet. This is something that we're waiting on a more comprehensive look on, and will likely come out closer to the end of the year. How digital marketing has evolved the first half of 2020 versus the second half of 2020. We want to see, as opposed to pre and during COVID, we want to see during versus post COVID, because that's going to help inform what we're looking at for 2021 and beyond. Expect in Q4 of this year another similar report. Okay, but very important, because we know that digital marketing is evolving right now, and it's going to evolve in the future. We need to see what that looks like. How much more business is done via e-commerce? How much more effective is uh, digital marketing versus local SEO? Because there are fewer people going into locations. Of course, looking at news and the world as it is, you would be hard pressed to believe that people are giving up their physical interactions. All right. The biggest opportunity still with prospects and new clients is to roll over advertising from physical marketing over to digital. Whether this be from conventions or trade shows um, or physical marketing, print marketing, uh, having all of direct mail. That's the word that I was looking for. Having all of these funds available to roll over to digital is crucial. Eyes on site are how engagements are going to proceed moving forward. Um, Return to your prospects that may have not been ready at the outset of the year and recommend to them that all of that budget that they've stored up for the past 4 to 5 months needs to go somewhere and needs to go back into marketing. Otherwise, they're losing eyes. The number one sin that I can see a lot of businesses make is to just cut off their messaging during this time. Businesses need to tell their audience, whether it be existing or new, that they're open, that they're servicing, that they're available. Don't let businesses just stop. That is the number one way that they lose any traction that they had previously or set their competitors further ahead of them. Okay, we'll go penultimate question here. I have a client with a Shopify site and products are integrated with Facebook. Over the years, there has never been a sale on Facebook. Is this typical, or is advertising on Facebook necessary? So again, you're not going to integrate to Facebook without an existing audience here. The integration with Facebook is more to share products than it is to do sales through Facebook. Unless this is being pulled to a Facebook marketplace, which I may be misunderstanding the question here, but if it's being pulled or the integration is just for share this product on Facebook, then you need to ensure that your audience is going to do that. And the chances that somebody is going to say, hey, check out this cool product that I really like, or check out this thing that I just bought, that doesn't happen. And we've seen that it doesn't happen, and that's not necessary. But if it's integration with Facebook Marketplace, where you're sharing it via Facebook, it can't just be automated. Much like with the Reddit post that we talked about at the outset, you can't just cold post something and hope people will engage with it. You need to give them a reason to. It's much better to do a customized marketplace post with more detail than to just copy and paste a listing from your client's site over to Facebook. Okay. And last question, can you elaborate on direct mail? People are still getting mail. I understand trade shows and in-person networking. So direct mail, meaning things like flyers, door hangers, or junk mail. People are still getting mail, yes, but people are hesitant to touch things right now. You see things still come through in the mail, but I don't know if you've noticed as much as I have, but my junk mail has nearly diminished to zero. People are not doing direct mails because people don't want to touch things that they don't know where they've been. And people aren't going to take the time to sanitize something that they're going to throw out anyway. This goes for anything that would go on a door or would be delivered. People are not engaging with these things. Typically, a big market for this is real estate agents. Real estate agents do a lot of goodies, whether they be calendars or magnets or flyers or door hangers to say, look what's sold in your area. That is stopping because people don't want to even consider touching and reading these things, let alone having them in their house without knowing where they've been. So a lot of businesses are stopping their direct mailing engagements in favor of just not doing anything. And that's the wrong way to do things. So for businesses that do this, whether it be magazines or newspapers or direct mailers, that's potential. That's potential budget that can be rolled over into digital. And that's where we as digital marketers have an in. Biggest opportunity. All right. Fantastic. A lot of excellent questions today, everybody. I hope everybody really enjoyed this, a kind of unorthodox webinar here. I know I've absolutely enjoyed it. This has been great. I want to thank everybody for coming out, everybody who submitted questions. I'm sure that this is recorded, and I'm sure that Devesh is going to share this with everyone as well. But again, I want to thank everybody. This is a great session, and I look forward to doing more of these in the future.
This is great, Chris. Thanks a lot. It was amazing. I think it was very engaging, a lot of questions, and definitely a very different format. So thank you all. Thank you, Madhu, Can, Peter, Mark. Amazing questions. And I will be posting this recording, but you might not see it on Workplace right away, but you will see it on the supplier channel right away. So we have our suppliers videos channel that is on the e-marketplace. Just scroll down to supplier webinars. It instantly gets uploaded there. So I don't have to do anything. So with the workplace stuff, just hang on. It will be posted on Workplace soon. So thank you all and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you for having me. Thanks for coming out. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye.